At my brother-in-law's retirement party, he joked. She'll get there someday when pigs fly. Everyone laughed as I raised my glass. I waited 10 years, built quiet legal cases against every fraud he ever hid. And when it finally broke, he was stripped of his retirement, indicted for corporate theft, and blackballed from every professional association. His family changed their last name to avoid being associated with him, and he dies every day in obscurity, shunned by everyone he once mocked. I've kept this quiet for over a decade. I never told anyone, not my wife, not my best friend, not even my therapist. But after everything that's happened, I'm ready now. It started with one sentence, a throwaway joke at a party, but it stayed with me like a thorn under the skin. And what I did next? I don't regret a single second. It was my brother-in-law's retirement party. Rick. That was his name. Rick was always the loudest guy in the room. Tall, tan, way too polished. The type who slapped your back too hard and looked over your shoulder when you talked. He made good money, wore watches that cost more than my car, and talked like he was running for office. He had this fake charm that fooled most people. Not me. Rick had been at the same company for 30 years, climbed the ladder, and now he was retiring early. That night, the backyard was packed. Big catered setup. Music. Booze. Probably 100 people, coworkers, neighbors, his golf buddies. I only went for my wife, Shannon, Rick's younger sister. I'd been with Shannon for over a decade. Rick never liked me. From day one, he treated me like I was beneath him. I worked in forensic accounting. Not glamorous, not flashy, but I was good at it. Rick liked to jab at me in little ways. At birthdays, holidays, still digging in the dirt? What's it like chasing other people's mistakes for a living? I always let it roll off. I didn't need his approval. That night, I was standing with a group of people, some cousins, Rick, a guy from his firm. I was telling them how I was thinking of going out on my own, opening my own practice. I'd been planning it for months. Rick raised his glass, laughed, and said loud enough for everyone to hear. She'll get there someday when pigs fly. Everyone laughed. Hard. People I barely knew were chuckling, looking at each other. One woman literally slapped her knee. I just stood there holding my drink. I smiled. Nodded like I didn't care. But something inside me went cold. Right then I knew. I wasn't going to forget it. I wasn't going to fight back in the moment. That would have made me look petty. Weak. I was going to take my time. Watch him. Learn everything. And when he least expected it, I'd take everything. The thing about Rick was he loved to brag. Especially to people he thought were too dumb to understand what he was saying. He'd talk about his consulting side gigs, how he built streams of revenue in retirement, how his tax guy was a genius at keeping things off the radar. It didn't sound right to me. I wasn't just an accountant, I was a forensic accountant. I worked fraud cases, big and small. I knew what dirty money sounded like. At the time, I didn't have access to any real proof. Just chatter. But I started paying attention. Every family dinner, every company he mentioned, every throwaway comment about creative accounting. I took mental notes. Then I started writing them down. I built a spreadsheet of everything Rick was involved with, companies, LLCs, names he mentioned, suppliers he boasted about. I ran public searches on every one of them. Some were registered to P.O. boxes in Nevada. Some were foreign. One company billed over $4 million in freight consulting, even though it had 0 staff and a website with stock photos. That's when I knew. He wasn't just bending the rules. He was breaking them. But it still wasn't enough. Not yet. Over the next few years, I built my career slowly, steadily. I opened my own forensic accounting firm. I picked up clients. Small ones at first, then bigger. By year 5, I was doing contract work for law firms that handled corporate cases. Some of those firms were connected to companies Rick had worked with. I stayed in the shadows. Never mentioned Rick's name. I made sure I was seen as professional, detached, just another expert following the numbers. But behind the scenes, I was piecing everything together. Rick had set up a network of shell companies. They'd bill services, logistics, safety reviews, even employee morale assessments to the company he worked for. Then those shell companies funneled the payments back to him or his wife or a fake nonprofit. He ran out of a storage unit. I found emails he'd sent from personal accounts. I found signatures on documents that tied him directly to board decisions he claimed he wasn't part of. And the more I found, the more disgusted I became. He didn't just steal. He used his position to award contracts to himself, overcharged for fake services, and even cut funding from legitimate vendors just so his side companies could step in. It was millions.
Et des stollen millions.
By year 8, one of the law firms I worked with took on a shareholder lawsuit against Rick's old company. They suspected financial fraud but didn't have the proof. I had it. All of it. I asked to be assigned to the case anonymously. I told them I had experience in the manufacturing space and could follow complex paper trails. They agreed. For the next 14 months I gave them everything. Slowly. Carefully. I traced payments, built diagrams, connected addresses, tracked offshore transfers. I made sure it was airtight. By the time it was ready for court, the evidence was devastating. Rick was called in for a deposition. He tried to delay it. Failed. He showed up in a blazer and sunglasses, still playing the part. The attorney opened a folder and slid the first document across the table. Rick looked down and went pale. One by one, the documents kept coming. Bank transfers, fake invoices, corporate minutes with his signature, photos of properties tied to shell companies. By the end of that day, Rick couldn't speak. His hands were shaking. He tried to walk out twice. He knew. He was done. The deposition didn't just shake Rick. It rattled the entire company. A week later, they issued a public statement saying they were cooperating fully with authorities and deeply troubled by what had come to light, which was total crap. They'd known something was off. They just didn't care. Rick brought in numbers, and numbers meant stock prices stayed up. Until they didn't. The SEC got involved next. So did the DOJ. Once the federal investigation started, it spiraled fast. They froze Rick's accounts, put a lien on the Galveston house, served search warrants, pulled his wife's financials too. I wasn't supposed to know all that, but I had contacts. Quiet ones. Rick's life was falling apart. But the real twist. Shannon, my wife, found out. I never told Shannon what I was doing. I didn't lie exactly, but I left out the parts about Rick. I figured let her stay clean. Let her think this whole storm came out of nowhere. But when Rick's face showed up on the news, when anchors started throwing around words like embezzlement and fraud network, she put it together. I walked in one night to find her sitting on the couch, TV muted, court documents spread out on the coffee table. She didn't even look at me at first. "Did you do this?" she asked. Not angry. Just hollow. I didn't lie. I told her the truth. I told her everything, from the retirement party to the files, to the lawsuit, to the deposition. I told her why. When I was done, she didn't speak for a long time. Then she stood up, went into the bedroom and shut the door. We didn't talk for 3 days. When we finally did, she asked me just one thing. Was it worth it? I looked her in the eyes and said, yes. She left a week later. I lost her. I knew I might. And yet hurt like hell. But I didn't stop. Rick was still spinning his story. He did a local interview. Some cable show in Texas claimed he was being targeted, said it was all political. A witch hunt. The usual garbage. That was a mistake. The lawyers released more documents. So did the SEC. They didn't name me, but they didn't need to. Everything was laid out. Then a journalist picked up the story. Young guy, hungry local watchdog type. He ran a 5-part series titled, The Fraud Beneath the Factory. How one man stole millions while the board slept. That headline stuck. Rick became a national joke in corporate circles. The kind of case professors brought up in business ethics classes. His neighbors sold their house to get away from the attention. His country club membership was revoked. His wife filed for divorce, citing financial betrayal and reputational harm. His kids, grown by then, legally changed their last name and cut off contact. I heard someone once yelled at him in a grocery store parking lot. Hey Rick, seen any flying pigs lately? He didn't answer. He just got in his old van and drove off. One night, almost a year after Rick's indictment, I got a letter. No name. No return address. Just a typed note inside. I know what you did. And you're not as clean as you think. That was it. I stared at that letter for a long time. First I thought maybe it was Rick. maybe someone loyal to him. But it didn't feel like his style. Then I started thinking back to everything I'd dug into, every account I'd accessed, every file I pulled through back channels. Some of those channels, yeah, they weren't technically legal. I'd blurred lines, maybe crossed some. I didn't steal anything, but I sure as hell didn't get all that evidence through public databases either. And now someone knew. I'd spent 10 years planning this revenge. But now someone was watching me. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. I shredded it, but the words stayed with me. I know what you did. And you're not as clean as you think. Whoever wrote it knew enough to make me nervous. I had to assume they were right. I wasn't fully clean. I'd broken into a few private systems using an old contact from a prior case. Nothing major, but enough to disbar an attorney or tank a forensic license. I told myself it was worth it. I'd gone after a thief, a fraud, a man who ruined lives. But now someone else had leverage. I started checking my email twice a night, wiping my search history, watching parked cars outside my house. I changed routines. It was paranoia, yeah, but I knew how people like Rick operated. He might be down, but he had money stashed. He had favors to call in. Or maybe it wasn't Rick. 3 months after the letter, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short. Mr. Davis, an interesting report you filed on Enclave Logistics. Would you like to explain how you got access to the private vendor index? Click. Enclave Logistics was one of the shell companies Rick used. I'd broken through their firewall using a connection from a client I once helped in Delaware, technically a violation of data access laws. Nothing I could prove I didn't do. And now, someone was sniffing around. A week later, I got a subpoena not from Rick's defense, but from the Department of Justice. They weren't after me. They wanted me to testify again. Only this time they were looking into something bigger. Apparently, Rick's fraud wasn't just about corporate theft. They'd found connections to defense contractors, government contracts, inflated pricing, potential bribery. The hole was deeper than anyone thought, and the DOJ wanted me to follow the money again. Quietly, I had a choice. Say no and risk someone looking into how I did what I did. Say yes and step deeper into the fire. I said yes. The DOJ gave me protected contractor status. I signed NDAs thicker than a phone book. I started digging again. This time it wasn't just Rick, it was his partners, executives, military consultants, procurement officers. Turns out Rick wasn't the mastermind. He was a puppet, one of 5. He thought he was slick, but the real game was being played behind his back. His shell companies were used to clean money, but the strings were pulled by people higher up, people who didn't like the spotlight I'd shined on him. And now I was digging into their pockets. It didn't take long. Someone hacked my office Wi-Fi. A fake invoice showed up on my company site. Then a flood of negative reviews. Clients started asking questions. Then my bank flagged a suspicious withdrawal attempt using cloned credentials. Then I got another note, handwritten this time. Stop digging, accountant, or we bury you in court. I knew what that meant. Lawsuits, allegations, bar complaints. All legal, but all meant to drain me, distract me, ruin me. I sat at my desk staring at the wall, wondering how far this could go. I wasn't scared of Rick anymore. Now I was up against something bigger. And worse? They knew I had no one left. Shannon had moved to Austin, remarried. My firm had downsized. I was working from a small rented office above a deli. No staff. No support. Just me. And a mountain of secrets. I could stop. Walk away. Let the DOJ figure it out without me. Or I could go deeper. Find the real numbers. Burn the whole network to the ground, even if it took me down with it. I thought about Rick's laugh that day at the party. I thought about 10 years of silence. About what it felt like to stand alone and bring down a giant. And then I knew. I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The threats didn't stop me. They tried everything: smear campaigns, false reports. Even had someone show up at my house pretending to be an IRS agent. I played dumb. Smiled. Offered him coffee. Took his fake badge. And snapped a picture when he went to the bathroom. Sent it straight to my DOJ contact. That night, I packed up my home office and moved into a hotel under a different name. I was done playing defense. If they wanted a war, I was going to give it to them. I reached out to someone I swore I'd never speak to again, Ravi Kapoor. He was a gray hat. Not quite criminal, not quite clean. We crossed paths years ago on a Ponzi case. He owed me one. I asked him to trace the contracts tied to Rick's companies, especially the ones with Department of Defense codes attached. What he sent back, I'll never forget it. One of the shell companies Rick used was funneling money straight into a defense firm that didn't exist on any official vendor list. And that firm was tied to a former senator's son. The payout path was clean contracts to shell company, invoice to shell company B, payment to consulting firm C, who then donated to a PAC that backed 2 congressional campaigns.
Millions.
Hidden in plain sight. Rick was just the bait. A stepping stone. He'd been stealing, but they were laundering. The DOJ had no clue how deep it went. I packaged everything, every fake address, every hidden donation, every vendor code, and sent it directly to the Special Investigations Division with a single line. You wanted more? Here's the rest. Took 6 months. But when it hit like a bomb. 3 high-level arrests. A Senate ethics investigation. 2 firms shut down overnight. A procurement director from the Pentagon quietly resigned. The media called it the quiet funnel scandal. Rick's name wasn't even in the headlines anymore. He was a footnote now. He didn't matter. He was small-time next to the people I dragged out. But he still got his own reckoning. Rick tried to sue me from jail. Said I violated his privacy rights and used illegal methods to target him. The judge dismissed it in 10 minutes. I showed up to the courthouse just to watch his face when the decision came down. He was thinner now. I sunk in, wearing a used suit from a jail ministry program. When he saw me sitting in the back row, he froze. I stood up, smiled, and walked out. That was the last time I saw him. 3 weeks later, I got a message from a journalist I knew. Rick Delaney found unresponsive in his cell. Suicide suspected. I stared at my screen for a long time. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel bad. I just felt done. People love revenge stories where the hero wins, walks away clean, and lives happily ever after. That's not this story. I lost my marriage. I lost friends. My name is poison in some legal circles. There are firms that won't touch me. Too dangerous. Too connected to that case. I live alone now. Smaller house. Fewer people. But I sleep better than I ever have. Because Rick laughed at me in front of 100 people and thought he'd gotten away with it. Because he spent his last days rotting in the same silence he tried to put me in. Because I tore down the empire he built on lies and took the giants behind him with it. Because when he said, "She'll get there when pigs fly," I didn't argue. I just smiled and waited for the sky to turn dark with wings.